beards and decorations, and now they're all packed in bags, and probably gonna drop them off this weekend somewhere at for gifts, since we can't really visit for real Christmas anymore. I'm just gonna leave them on people's doors.
That is so nice. Oh, that's a great treat. That's great. Kathleen, I love seeing your dog go by.
Yeah, I'm sorry. She likes to sit up there.
Great. That's part of the fun of the whole thing. Part of the fun. Well, here we are. We are at almost 10 past. So I have a feeling that as holidays approach, we may be a smaller crew. And so it sounds like if anybody has mittens, rather than do our hold them up, although I will, does anybody have any to hold up? I love the hat. Oh, nice. Nice. They look great. So fun. There you go. So here's my thought. If you can think of it in the next week or two, and I'll send out an email to everybody who signed up for any part of it. If you could email me 2 pictures of your mittens, one any way you want, and one that mimics the way we had the advertisement or the thing on the thing like this, then I'll try to figure out something fun to do with all our images to put them together. You know, those posters that have all the doors or something. I think something like that would be really fun to do that. So, and now, right in the middle of my screen anyway, we have Karen Nicholson with us, who I've been corresponding with, and she has this neat hobby about doing what we all have loved doing, which is recreating historical objects. So, Karen, can you tell us a little bit about how you do this and some of your projects, what you've done?
Well, the reason this all started was because I asked Susie if I could get good pictures of the real mittens, because rather than knitting them to the scale that the pattern is, I wanted to try and knit them at the at its original scale. And so this is not the first time I've done this. The first time I did this, it was a pair of Egyptian socks in the British Museum. And I worked with a friend of mine who actually had the money and the ability to go there in person and see them up close and take measurements and lots of pictures. And then when she came back, we worked together on recreating the pattern. And that was really fun. It was not knitting, however, it was something called null binding. And that's a very, very ancient craft that predates knitting. But these particular socks look like they were knitted. So that was my first experience at trying to recreate something that was done in the past. And I had so much fun doing it that I've sort of kept on doing it ever since. And so in 2016, there was a shaker exhibit at the Metropolitan that I didn't even actually know was there because I wasn't paying attention. And we wandered into it and it was fabulous. It was fabulous. But one of the things that was just sort of tucked in the corner was this pair of fingerless gloves. And I don't know if people will be able to see if I try to show you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But that's the glove. And I sort of became intrigued by it because it was not made like any other fingerless glove pattern that I had seen. First of all, it's very, very knit with very fine yarn. There's 63 stitches around the cuff.
Wow.
Sometimes I do this when I'm actually working with museums, and other times like this one, I just did it from photographs that I took. So I had to make assumptions when I was trying to redo it based on what I could see in my photos. So I did it, and basically it takes a lot of, these are my.
Nice.
Very cool.
So these are knit on size 0 needles, which were the smallest that I happen to have handy because I've got my double zeros on another in the middle of another project. And I could not make the gauge. So I believe they were probably knit on double zeros. So this, what I did with these was after I did the cuff, I decreased to 60 and then it fit me fine. Because in this case, my goal was to make a pair of gloves that I could wear and see what that told me about the design of the glove compared to the kind you can go out in the store and buy today. And so by doing that, what I learned was, you know, one thing, it has a very short cuff compared to what we typically knit. And I think from wearing them, what that does is it's long enough to cover your pulse point, so it keeps your blood warmed as it's going through your hands, but it's not so long that it interferes with the cuffs of your clothes. So it's kind of really cool. And I really like having the pinky finger because it means it doesn't slip around on your hand. It stays put. So these were made as work gloves. That's what the tag in the Metropolitan said. And I think they would be fantastic as work gloves. Just like the mittens, they have the initials cross-stitched onto them. So, you know, so that they knew who they belonged to.
Mhm.
The other sort of strange to our thinking bit to this pattern is, I don't know if you can see, but just the first and last, well, the last stitch on either side of the thumb gusset is a purl stitch. And that pattern technique dates all the way back to very early sock knitting, like the 1500s, where as far as we can tell, the only reason for that was to mimic the seam that would go up the back of your leg when you made socks out of cloth, which is what predated stockings out of knitting. Maybe it gives you a little bit of extra maneuverability, but I don't know that it really does. But I like it, so I've been putting it. I kept putting it in there. And so then when I tried to do the shaker mittens that everybody else is knitting, and I will get to eventually, that's where I am so far. This is on size 0 needles. So to begin, you have to make some assumptions and start making gauge swatches. So this was my first gauge swatch. Let's see if you can see that. And that is fingering weight yarn on size 1 needles. And this is lace weight yarn on size 0 needles. So
Well, you're holding those up, Karen. Could you do me a favor? Well, you're holding those up. I don't know, maybe Kathleen already is. Are you on speaker view?
I am on speaker view. Yep. So when
Okay.
she's talking, she's big.
Oh, good, because I don't have it on mine, so I want to make sure it's true for everybody else though. Thank you.
So this one is fingering weight yarn, and it was much too big to make the chevron pattern. You know, this is, I think it's 12 stitches on each side of the chevron, each leg of the chevron, so 24 rows all together, or 25 because there's a single one in the middle. And this is 6. So it's much, you know, they sort of take up the same amount of space, but this one is way too big. But then, so when I was doing the cuff, it's pretty close to being to scale, to match the original mitten. But I don't know if you can see how much it comes out when you get to the body of the mitten. This compresses a lot because you're switching colors every single stitch, and I'm sure everybody who had never done that before found that when they were doing their mittens, even on the big needles. But if I maintained that same tension when I got up to the body of the mitten, it would make the little white fleas disappear. They would pull too tight into the knitting. So clearly that's not the right way to do that. So I backed it out, and that's still on the size 0 needles at the proper tension, but now it's too big. So what that tells me is I have to drop down to my size 00 needles if I want to keep the same stitch count around. And I will eventually do that once I finish my other project that's using those needles. But I think the first thing I will do is rip a little bit of this out and decrease so that it has fewer stitches around and so that I can still make it fit my hand, but don't exactly match the pattern. But I think that the size of the yarn is pretty close. The lace weight yarn is pretty close to what the original must be. I do hope someday I'll get to see that mitten in person, and then we can compare it for real. But and then you sort of have to decide, what's your purpose in making it? My first purpose is always to see what I can find out about why was it made the way it was made? What does that tell you about the person who was using it in the first place? And then my second purpose is, well, if I'm recreating it for a museum, I'm going to want to be as exact as I can be. If I'm recreating it for my own use, I want it to fit me. So I may make changes that don't impact the function of the piece, but just the size of the piece. And so I made the second pair on size 1 regular. This is regular sock yarn on regular size 1 sock needles. So I made those, and that's pretty good. And then I just had a bunch of leftover yarn, and I'm in the middle of making another set, because now that I understand the pattern, I can play with it and do whatever I want with it and, really make it my own. So that's kind of what I do and why I do the silly things I do.
I think
That's
that's really neat.
wonderful. Oh, I love that.
Very nice.
Very nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, very informative.
So
Great job.
does your mitt have a really deep gore for the thumb gusset? It seems like it starts right after the ribbing instead of up a little.
It does. There's one row before I started let me see. I don't know if you can see. There is just one row before the gusset starts. And that's pretty much what I could tell from the original mitten. The other thing that's a little bit weird with this and a little bit different, when we're making the mitten, when you get to make the thumb gusset, it's got a single stitch in the middle, and then you're going to increase on each side of that to begin, because you're going out like that. So in this case, because the purl stitches follow right up from the rib. The rib is knit 2 purl 1, and that, I don't know if my lighting here isn't very good, so I don't know if people can see.
We can
But
see it.
it follows the rib purl stitches right up, so that only leaves you 2 knit stitches between the purls. So when the first time that you do the first row of the thumb gusset, you've got to make 2 stitches in the space between those 2 knit stitches.
Well, I think let's stay in touch in that Ravelry chat. It's a great spot to share things, and I think as I've